what? You want to fight crime? Let's get dangerous.
And yes, it is showtime, and we're going to welcome Don on in because he was here on time and we started a little bit late. But I see you, Don. We got some things to talk about. Tonight's topic is going to be a revisiting of something that we talked about before. I have the link in our description here as to the original conversation, but we're going to flip the script a little bit on the main topic for tonight. But nevertheless, we're going to have some fun in doing so too. So hopefully everything is going okay there. I wish that I could say the same here, but it is what it is for right now. But let's go ahead and get the business in the things out of the way, such as Stupid O'Clock happening 1 hour into our show here. So if we get to the second hour, you could watch Stupid O'Clock. Then that is followed up by Last Man Standing at 1 a.m. Eastern. And then you get a respite until Monday where you have Nicholas Tockert and Nevermind the Furthermore. And don't forget about Comic Book Spectrum this upcoming Thursday, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And as always, it is that time once again. And this one is going to be a little bit special because we got some older books to look at today. Because why? It is that time for new comic book pickups for the week here. And we're going to start off with our Raw books first. We're going to start off with G.I. Joe 75 again. This is another copy of G.I. Joe 75. I've still got to eventually do that second part of that commission here. So I would have waited for a certain other person to do theirs first before I could don't repeat what he does. Then we got the second and last issue of this particular series. It's called Fight Girl Comics. This is Fight Girl Comics number 2. This is a Trina Robbins comic that was done, pretty much independently and kind of like underground. But this is this second and last issue of that series here. So I was able to track one of those down here. Now, I'm kind of a little bit upset about this one here. This is Liberty Metals number 5, but this is the second print. This is not first print. If I would have known that it was a second print, I would not have bid it on the auction for it here. But nevertheless, I am still happy that I finally got a copy of that here. And then we're getting closer and closer completing Dazzler, the first volume of Dazzler, which is Dazzler 27. So we finally got a copy of Dazzler 27. And then we got a copy of Spider-Woman 42. So we got a copy of that now. And then we got Wonder Woman Conan issue 5, the one missing part that I had here that was keeping me from having a complete run of Wonder Woman Conan. So we finally got the issue number 5. And I finally got issue number 3 of I believe this is the Dylan run of Legends of Wonder Woman here. Finally got that. And I got another copy of Wonder Woman 0, which is nice. And another copy of Wonder Woman number 1 from that same series. And I just going to do it this way. I finally completed. We finally got all of Wonder Woman 77. So this is all the Wonder Woman 77 special here, starting with issue number 1. All of these are perfect bound, by the way. They're perfect bound books. I already had a copy of issue 2, but I went ahead and got another one. And then there's issue 3. And the last and final issue, issue number 4 of Wonder Woman special. So I got all 4 parts of that particular Wonder Woman 77 series that mimics the TV series and Linda Carter here. And that brings us to the all-important CGC unveiling for the week. We're going to start with the stuff that made me kind of happy here. And then we want to save the last one, the one that I'm a little bit disappointed about, but not completely unhappy about, for last year. So we're going to start out with Wonder Woman 205. This is from Volume 1, 205. This is the second issue that Nubia appears in here. It is a side story here where it's like a side story of like who is Nubia, but it's a side story. So this is the second, technically the second issue appearance of Nubia in 205. And then, oh, by the way, that was a 7-0, and this is also a 7-0. This is the third appearance in continuity of Nubia here in 206 here. And yes, that is them fighting one another again, you know, in front of Ares and everything here. And 206 is technically supposed to be the origin of her being a Wonder Woman here, but except for a different tribe. So it is a pretty nice story in the long run here, but it's a worthwhile investment. Both of those came out a 7, so I'm not upset about that. You know, I'm actually quite glad, because it's like, you know, I really didn't know what to put these books at, but I'm glad that they came back as 7. And then the Curse of a Black Cover got me here. Every time I look at this, I was like, man, this just presents very, 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 very well. But after looking at the graders notes here, they got me for a lot of the small chipping and stuff that's on this issue here. There it is. Lois Lane 106. This was the better of the 2 copies that I had. It came back a 5-0. I don't think I can show you guys all of the small little chipping here, but we got a little bit of chipping there. And then on the back cover, it's, you know, they graded it pretty harshly here, mainly because they say it's like, oh, there's a loose, you know, they were saying it's like, oh, we had one loose staple, and I didn't have it as a loose staple before I sent it in. But it was talking about, you know, one loose staple, and then it was all these small little chips and a small little crease down here, right down there, and everything. But it presents very, very well, and some chipping up here. But they're saying the staining that's like right up in there. I mean, they were being very, very harsh with this book, but I quite certain that all of that is part of the curse of having a black cover, because all of the, you know, defects and everything just gets magnified a little bit more. But overall, it wasn't that bad. You know, it still presents very well. I mean, it looks a lot better than a 5. It looks better than a 5.0. It really does. It really does look better than a 5.0. But it is a 5.0. And it is mine. Now, does that mean I'm going to send my other one in? Probably not, because I know for a fact the other one was nowhere as close of being as good as this one here. But I could spend the money on it just to preserve it and just only read it digitally for right now. Read that story digitally. but we'll play it by ear for right now. But that's all the stuff that came in the mail this week for a new comic book for the week here. And I hope that you guys like that. And we're going to get into our topic. So I don't think we're going to run the full 2 hours this time around, mainly because I don't think we have a lot of people in the chat that's going to comment on a lot of the stuff. And like I said, it's revisiting the idea, can comics as a hobby fund itself? I believe it really depends on how long you have been collecting to determine yay or nay. I won't say that it is a myth, but I won't say that it is possible. I'm one of those people that will go, probably not. And the reason being is that you will never truly, kind of like break even, because if you buy into the philosophy of having the hobby pay for itself, you're going to eventually lose or give up issues that you love to consolidate down to solely the ones that you hold near and dear to your heart here. Like, for example, in my case here, if I really was a advocate for having the hobby of comics fund itself, a lot of my other comic book series that I have in my collection, such as like the Avengers, Flash, Legion, the Legionnaires, those series would get sold off. What I have in those series would get sold off. Why? Because those books would have to be used to fund getting better copies and better issues of X-Men and Wonder Woman and a handful of others. And that, to me, in a nutshell, just kind of makes me think the hobby doesn't fund itself. It really depends on how you really have your collection set up here. Or if you just, if you're only collecting, certain things, like if you were just only a diehard X-Men collector, it makes it easier. It makes it easier for you to give up those other books that you thought were cool and this, that, and the other. And if they were of some significant value, you could give them up or trade or do whatever you need to do to get what other issues in your X-Men run that you want. But that's the whole thing. You're literally giving up portions to fund your run here. And there's Elaine. Elaine is here now. So when you understand the aspect of having the hobby fund itself, it's about using what books you already have in that collection to fund or to get you other books that you really truly want. And it's not really kind of like, oh, if I buy like a modern book today, and when I say a modern book, I talk about something that comes off the rack today, I should be able to turn around and flip that book to get the next issue. It's like, it doesn't necessarily work that way. It has to work with older books. So, for like those who are now coming into this hobby, it will be harder for them to make the hobby work for itself unless you went ahead and bought like bigger books in the very beginning. And then you can say, it was like, well, that's something, I got something to killing the children #1. I could get rid of one of them to eventually get me like the first Gambit or something to that magnitude. That's the way it would work for them. But for like a person of my ilk who has a bigger collection, I would look at that and be like, I'm not giving up my X-Men 1. It's like, yeah, it's a 1/8. I'm not going to give that up unless I have a good lead on a better copy. And 9 times out of 10, I'm not planning to trade anything from my established collection to get the better one, I would be finding some type of way to fund it outside of that, because it's not, it's, to me, it's not an equal one-to-one trade-off here. I'll be losing out something that I'm not willing to truly give up right away or right now. Now, do I have extras in my collection? Yes. Have I sold some of my extras in my collection? Yes. Have I given away extras in my collection? Yes. But those extras are like few and far, well, I wouldn't say few and far between, but I have a plethora of them enough where I'm not going to miss them. And when I say a plethora, when you get into like having 6 and 7 copies of an issue, you're not going to miss that issue. I'm sorry. It's just that way here. And everybody's greeting one another, and we got, yep, I just arrived. It's like, or I can collect the titles that mean something to me. Well, that's the thing that I was really discussing here about the hobby funding itself. If you collect only the things that mean something to you, then the hobby can't fund itself, because eventually you're going to have to give up, sell off, or trade what you have in your current collection to either upgrade or to buy something else that means just as much to you. And that's why I'm up here saying that, is this truly a myth, or is this truly something that you have to really gauge upon where you're at as far as collecting is concerned? Not everybody is a long-term collector like I am. And what I mean by long-term, it's like I'm collecting this stuff not just to have it just to say I have it. I'm collecting it to a certain extent because of other outside dealings, where eventually some of this stuff is going to be used for archival and museum type purposes. So eventually, as things go along and as things get graded, they get preserved in such a way where I can say, okay, this is going to be in this exhibit over here. It will have some insurance applied by the entity that is using it for archival and historical purposes. And, there's going to be some monetary value to that. That's future. Now, when I get to that aspect of that type of future here, that monetary value is far different than what if I sold them, and who did I sell them to, and am I getting the biggest bang for the buck when I sell it off to somebody else, where I could be able to upgrade or get something equivalent. That trade-off is what is really being in discussion here about why the hobby funding itself is kind of like a myth. It's really kind of like a myth, but it really isn't. It will work for a lot of people who really don't have the room for hundreds or thousands of comics, especially since a lot of stuff can be collected in trades. But also at the same aspect here, if you don't have that room for it, for that type of stuff like you do, and you only want maybe like a handful of books that is near as dear to your heart, it works out for you for the better to allow the books that are valuable to either sell or trade them for something of equal or greater value that you truly want. That will work for you, but it doesn't work for all collectors. It only works for I wouldn't say work for a handful. It's like it may work for maybe like 25 to 30% of collectors. And like I said, if they're a long-term collector like me and they have a greater purpose outside of just the monetary value, then it doesn't work. Who's to say that it's truly a myth or not? But it's just one of those things that you have to truly talk about and really think about. Can this hobby truly fund itself? And that's what got me thinking earlier this afternoon, because I was talking to the business partner, and we were looking at, it's like, well, until things get graded, we have to recycle bags and boards every 2 to 4 years. And it's like, yeah, that gets costly to, keep everything up, and then to rebag and reboard, to keep moisture, to having certain things are taken care of financially, so to take care of these books until such a time where we finally got a brick and mortar where we can say, here's a, we're going to have Wonder Woman Day at this particular gallery. On Wonder Woman Day, we bring the Wonder Woman books and we set up our display and everything, and people will come in and view, and this, that, and the other, all the Wonder Woman books for over the years. So that's kind of like one of those things where it's like, do I, if I actually sold or traded key books from that series just to try to upgrade for one, it doesn't make any sense. But if I was not a long-term collector and was just one of those people that's like, I really love First Nubia, I really love All-Star Comics #8, I really love Wonder Woman #1, it would then make sense, because I wouldn't need the rest of the series. I would just only need those books that I want here. Yeah, not normal in that regard. But it's not about normalcy in this case here. The discussion is really to discover where you're at as far as the hobby is concerned. A lot of people are at that place where the hobby funding itself can work, especially those who are coming in within like the last, I would say, 20 years. They're in a perfect spot to do this. You'd be surprised of how many people out here in multimedia land, out here on the YouTubes and the TikToks, talking about comic book investment and how to invest and how to make that investment roll over until you get the book that you really want. And I've seen all these success stories about how people who have all these old grails, and when I say older grails, we're talking about books that are 5 digits in value or greater, upgrading to one book that they really want by getting rid of the other books that they have in their collection that they really don't care for as much anymore. It's like if they have to have one book, they rather have like Amazing Fantasy 15. So they're getting rid of like their giant size X-Men 1, their X-Men #1, all these particular Batman issues and stuff to that magnitude, just to upgrade to that one graded copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 that they could be happy about here. And yeah, the spec market. Yeah, that's also another thing, but that what makes modern comics hard to do the whole having the hobby fund itself, because 1 in 100s, 1 in 10s, 1 in 10s, 1 in 25, 1 in 50s, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, all of these so-called small ratio books and the speculation behind them makes it very, 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 very hard to get the bang for your buck in return when you go the route of having the comics fund itself. It makes it hard in the modern age of comics, but it's one of those things that you just gotta live with. Yeah, it's like you gotta love the spec bros. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Spec bros on Dark Hawk #1. I still not going to get over that. That mean Dark Hawks #1s, they're out there, is still not seeing as much value as some of the better books that are out there. Also, I shouldn't be one to talk because, to be quite honest here, there's no way. Yeah, there's no way I should own 6 or 7 graded copies of Savage She-Hulk #1. I shouldn't have that many. Technically, I should be selling some of them off, but I'm going like, eventually get there. Eventually we get there, and I could see it. Yeah. Yep, I got my cherry Coke. Yep. The drink of the show unofficially. And if Coca-Cola was watching, yeah, please sponsor. I do drink your product. And I do drink it on the show religiously. So it is what it is. Yep. So, but that's the key thing here. I'm glad that, we have Elaine and we have Don here, because Don is a collector like myself here. And I'm not certain if he falls into the same category as I do when it comes to, the long term. Because I know it's like, you still doing the comic book dealing, or are you moving more towards, like, just archival type stuff here? And I know Elaine is one of those collectors that is like, I just want to collect what I want and what I like, and that, in a nutshell, kind of makes the hobby funding itself almost an impossibility, because she's not trying to sell off the stuff that she really wants to keep. She's going to keep it. It is what it is. Yep, he's still dealing. So, with Don being a dealer, he has to deal with the speculation, and that's a problem. That's another problem with the hobby funding itself, because he has to deal with the speculation. Oh, speaking of which, Don, did you how many of the Fantastic Four packs did you come across this weekend? Because I haven't bought any as of yet. I'm looking at the books, and a lot of the books are modern Fantastic Four books. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to hold off on this one. Yeah, finally did. Oh, you finally did a Whatnot show? Cool. None. I didn't. It's like I didn't want any. Okay, but that's a whole nother big thing about speculation here, because those Whatnot packs. I mean, I still feel like I got stuck with the Hulk Captain America packs here, because nobody wants those things, those books. All of those were, I hate to say it, either facsimiles or reproductions of the original books. And since I had the majority of those original books, it didn't make any sense for me to buy the packs unless I really want the foil or the prism covers, or take a gamble of getting one of the sketch covers, the one of one sketch covers that were in there. But that's a needle in a haystack type deal of trying to invest in something to that magnitude, hoping that if I did get that book, all the other books that were in the pack I could sell off and kind of regain my money. Yeah, I wanted the blue foil, but it's basically silver with a blue tinge to it, lame sauce. Yeah, I saw a couple of the blue foils, and I'm just like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really silver with a hint of blue blending into it. It's not a true deep blue foil. It's more like a silver blue. It's almost like, how can I put this? The silverish blue that's in like the Detroit Lions uniforms. That Honolulu blue typish color. It's like a silver blue, but it's just weird in that aspect here. Me and Leia thought it could be a 2099 foil. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, I didn't know what books were in there, and from what I've seen, that from a pack getting open, it was a lot of modern Fantastic Four. It would have been different with like volume one stuff up in there. I was like, oh, I might be interested in getting volume one stuff, like some of the older stuff, getting, reproduce or remanufacture. It's like, yeah, I might be interested in that, but nah. Yeah, the blue, not even close. Yeah. It's the only thing people are going to look at is like it's shiny. It's shiny, and it's shiny and it's blue tinted. And on the cover that I saw that had the blue foil, it was pretty nice. It was pretty nice, but it was just, how can I put this? It's not worth $40 to $50 for a pack just to get it. That's just me. Yeah, my intentions is to bequeath my library of comics and literature to my to the daughters of the friends who I hope appreciate them. My vintage Doctor Who novels go to my boys, and that's a worthwhile thing to have as a library, and that's the thing in the bigger scheme of things as far as value. Now, in my previous video, which is in the notes here, we actually talked about the monetary value of books. But now, I'm asking this question as far as people's intentions with their collections, because in your attempt of in your aspect of lane, you're not really trying to seek greater monetary value. You just building a library that you can share with other people, just like how I'm building, actual displays that could be, shared with the masses. I mean, trust me, it's not easy trying to house multiple volumes of a series. And it's weird. It's weird. And I was like, I'm like in my own head. And it's kind of a hard thing to kind of grasp. But when you're as close as I am to having a title that ran from like 1940 something to now without missing an issue, except for annuals. I don't really collect annuals, but as far as the monthly, bi-monthly, weekly issues of that series, not missing one. That is a chore within itself. Now, mind you, it's like, as I go through the stuff that I have in storage and everything, I had one person up there. It's like, why are there 5 short boxes of this? And it's like, well, you have to think about it. Volume 1 of X-Men went 545 issues. And he kind of looked at me. It's like, then he looked back at the boxes, then he goes through the boxes and he flipping. You're insane. It's like, what do you mean? That's all 545 issues. I was like, yes. And there's duplicates up in here. Yes. Why is that insane? It's like most people wouldn't care. And I was like, I do. And then he thought about it some more, and then he was like, it's like, you got to protect your Wonder Woman at that point. It's like, yeah, I have to. And it's like, and people don't realize, it's like, if I get the missing, I think it's like 132 issues in the very beginning of issue number 1, not issue number 1, volume 1. That's volume 1 all the way to what, issue number 30 something in the current King run, and how many is in Absolute Wonder Woman, without missing an issue. We're talking somewhere close to over 1,000 issues of Wonder Woman, plus duplicates. Not an easy thing to maintain. Not an easy thing to easily think about. Hey, I'm going to let the hobby fund itself. I'm going to sell this book over here, this key issue of Wonder Woman over here, to possibly get me an All-Star Comics number 8, which is, somewhere about 5 figures. That's not going to happen. And we're not talking about low 5 figures, we're talking about high 5 figures. So we just not going to do this here. Yeah, the British editions, Baker and Pertwee, those are worth real money in the right markets. Exactly, British version. Yep, they're worth. And that's the key thing here. Some people are really, really guided by the monetary aspect of it, and other people are more motivated by the longevity aspect of it, and making certain that further generations get to see it. People like you and I, Elaine, we look at other generations, but we got also people who look at the monetary value of it. That was kind of like one of the things that I'm glad that Daphne Lace, showed me the one article from the New York Times about the peonies and how Columbia College is going to take over their whole archive of ElfQuest when they pass. That way, none of that artwork, none of the sketches, none of the concept works, the pages that made up all the different titles of ElfQuest that they did goes to waste or get lost in history. They are planning to archive it after their deaths and hold on to it for future generations of artists to be able to go and look at it and learn from it and go from it and go from there. By no means can something like that be used to fund itself. You can't really sell, well, you might be able to sell some pages, but what are you going to put in replace of it? You can't. There's no real monetary motivation to do something like that. And that's kind of like the key thing here. Wowzers, I'm here and I was wondering if I even managed to sell all of the Aliens omnibus before I'm 70. See, those are the types of things where it's like only these special curated audiences like ours in the comic book industry would only care to have those types of things here. So it really comes back down to what is your own drive here. And that's the key thing here. If you're more on the longevity side, as far as preserving the actual books for other generations to at least see and experience and to seek out, yep. Get all those books. Yep. It's one of those things that you just gotta, kind of get to and deal with. Now, like I said, with Don is more of a comic book dealer, so he has clientele that he's dealing with here. So he has to deal with some of the speculative aspects of it. But his own personal collection, I really don't. I think he's more of a longevity type person than the short term. But that's just me. I mean, if I'm wrong, Don, then ring in and tell me I was wrong on that aspect. But because of the fact that you are a dealer, you have to go through the whole gamut of the whole speculation type deal, and that could play a big role in how you view things here. Well, I know folks who collect numerous editions of Tolkien works. Yeah, it's no difference. Yeah, my PC is honestly just recollecting my childhood, and that's perfectly fine. And with that, it's like you probably just going to concentrate only on particular books of your childhood that you just really want. So technically you could have the hobby fund itself while you're doing the business end of the dealing. Yeah, spec market sucks in the dealing market. Yeah, it does. It really does here. Speaking of which, Don, I did finally get a first printing of Young Avengers 1, which I'm probably going to eventually send to CGC 2. But I know the spec on that book has gone down. Not a whole bunch, but it's gone down. But it's not going to be a book that I'm going to sell, but it's just one of those things that's like, I finally got the one missing book out of that run that I was missing here. And we're talking about volume 1, the original volume 1 here. So now I could go and get that one graded plus the director's cut graded and be happy. Just like how I took out and this is I mentioned this last week. I don't understand how Gotham City Sirens #1, the second print, is worth more than the first print, but that just it is. Yeah, nice. No, nice grabs. Yeah, nice grabs. Yeah, I mean, it just it is what it is. I mean, I just can't. It's just one of those things that just really it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder here. And I'm going to say this too. I did buy a comic that I'm going to make a present to one of our viewers here, only because she mentioned it, and every time it came up, I ended up either getting it or somebody else kept scooping it up from her. So I was able to track one down, was able to get it at a decent price, and now she has her own copy as soon as it arrives, and I can ship it out to her. And yes, it is a #1 issue or something. So that I'm not going to ruin the surprise as of yet because she's not here. But at the same time, I made the key people in her camp know that I got one, not to allow her to buy another copy of it. But it's just one of those things that's just like, when I see things and when I see things and I see that it's unequitable, and then I put the feelers out there to certain dealers like yourself, Don, to say, hey, if you come across one, let me know, because I know somebody who may want it. And when those people let me down and I come across a random auction and it's like, oh, I need this. Let me go ahead and get this, and then be like, here, you was looking for this here. It's going to cost me a few dollars, but what's a few dollars? Now that's something that, like I say, if I go based upon the hobby funding itself, that's money that I could have put towards a different book, but it is what it is here. No, it is not for Beanie. It's not for Beanie, but Beanie knows what the book is. So that's the whole thing. So Beanie knows what book it is. It's not for Beanie, but Beanie knows what the book is. Because I already kind of let certain people in their camp know what book it is, because of the simple fact that I was told about, oh, it's so hard to get this book and this, that, and it's like, it's really not, but because there's so many in circulation in the secondary market, that it's hard to come by for cheap. And when I say for cheap, I'm talking about somebody that's not trying to get over on spec prices. So, I just don't believe that this issue is, as, if I could say, as expensive as what they say it is here. Matter of fact, let me try to do this real quick to see if what I'm thinking is very, very true. If it is, then I'm going to let you guys in on the secret here. If it is not, then there's something else going on here that I'm not aware of. I just now noticed that my second screen is not working. Well, it's always something about these places and passwords. There we go. Still strange that the second monitor is not working. Oh wow, this is so not right. Oh, now I'm beginning to understand why it's so not right. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to let you guys on a little secret here. Yep, I'm going to let you guys in on the secret here. Yep, I'm going to let the secret out here. This is why speculation is bad. Very, very bad. And I'm not saying speculation is bad for the industry, but speculation on certain books is very, very bad. I just looked up the book that I was referencing here. I'm going to try to do this. No, it's only seeing one screen now. Great. So I got to do it like this here. So let me go ahead and share screen. There it is. That's the book in question. You notice what I'm seeing here? If you paid attention here, the 9.6, the last sale of the 9.6 was $11. The 9.4 was 40 and the 9.2 is 75 and the 8.5 was 19. Exactly, Don. Exactly. Exactly. So that's why I always say it's like, you know what? You don't really want to you really don't want to go the direction of spec the way that most people would go with spec here, because that to me just leads you down a road of headache and pulling your hair out and worry and regret, which you don't want to to have regrets in the bigger scheme of things here. I forgot what my username was on Go Collect. Okay, give me a second here. Hold on. We're going to take a look at it on Go Collect as well. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. I'm about to say, I know what my password is, but we're going to have to find out here. Fair market value. Because I know what the fair market value is, but these are tools that I always have to go back to just to show people, to get them to realize, hey, the error of their ways here. So there it is, the book that's in question here. Notice how they don't give fair market value for the 9.8, the 9.6. The 9.4, they have fair market value of 50, 9.2, 32, and the 8.5, $20. The book itself, if you ever buy one in a while that is not graded, should go no higher than 20. And here it's saying there's no 8.0 on the census and there's only 175. And to be quite honest with you here, they're saying there's 4 9.0s on the census. I own a 9.0. I own an actual 9.0 FemForce 1. So that's the only reason why. But if certain said individual, now I'm going to have one as soon as it arrives in the mail here. It begins to dance. So now she's dancing. So, yep. So that's the reason why, I won't say spec is terrible, but understanding what is part of that bubble and what is not a part of that bubble is what you need to understand as far as what is true fair market value here. A lot of people argue that what Go Collect have on their surveys is not fair market value. What I showed you with GPA is not true fair market value, but when you look at both, you kind of get a good idea what true fair market value is here. And like I said, when I look at the GP analysis here, that 9.6 selling for $11. That's only sales data. That does not necessarily mean that the book isn't worth more. That just means that somebody was willing to let it go for $11. Just like with the 9.440, and somebody picked up a 9.2 for 75. And that 9.2 was back in 2023. The $40 one was July 2023, and the $11 sale was back in 2024. And then we have a 8.5 that was a $19 sale in May of 2024. So it's weird in that aspect when you look at the dates and times of when stuff is purchased, but that does not give you a clear fair market value either. But between the two, you get a good idea. Some people like cover price. Some people like Key Collector. Speaking of Key Collector, I don't think FemForce is in Key Collector like that, or is it? Yep, it is. And it's funny. On Key Collector, FemForce number 1 is not listed, which is weird. They got all the issues outside of issue number 19. No, I'm serious. Let me come back to big screen for a second before I can show you this and see if it comes up on camera, right? There it is. If I hold it like that, you're able to see it. That is issue 19. So it's not even generating issue number 1. They saying issue 19 is a key. And the only reason issue 19 is a key is because it's the first Greg Horn art in comics. I did not know that. I honestly did not know that. So at least now I learned something today. And then, that was a photograph cover for 116, 117. Notice how Key Collector is having like the issues in the 100s, $90. All of these short run issues, $50. I know I probably have 2 of those, 137s. I have a 141, it's like 18, 45. These are all the issues that led up to possibly issue 100, 188. Now, I don't have 188, but these are kind of like one of those things that when you look at it on the surface, and, this is kind of going back to what we were talking about the comics funding themselves. When we use these tools the way that they are supposed to be meant, it's like it's no way possible for long-term collectors to do it, but short-term, easy, very easy, because they have to rely on the spec behind it. But you learn something every day. Like I said, the learning the whole thing about first Greg Horn art, and lo and behold, I think that's the only book that I'm one of the books that I am missing out of my Film Force collection. Because if I had it, why didn't I realize that? Huh. Interesting. Going over to COZ real quick here as we do this. Yep, that is one of the issues that I am missing. So, yep, I still have to look for one. But nevertheless, it is what it is here. But, when you get into that aspect of, can the books that I buy today help me fund getting other books later on? It really depends on what, the means of how you're collecting and what you're collecting and your end goal. If your end goal is to have it fund itself, then you have to come to the grips of not holding on to any books for a long period of time. You're not a long haul collector. You can't be. No way possible for you to be a long haul collector and have a hobby fund itself. And when I say long haul, I'm talking about how I started off saying it doesn't work for myself. It's like having every issue of volume 1 of X-Men. Unless I'm willing to give up some of the other books, such as like the Avengers and stuff like that, yeah, you could do it. But if I wanted to upgrade my X-Men number 1, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to sacrifice my issue 2, 3, and 4 to my issues 1, 2, 3, and 4 to upgrade that issue number 1 from a 1/8 to like a 2/0 or a 3. I'm not going to do that. That's just something that's just not in my nature. Now, if I was one of those ones that's like, you know what, I only wanted issue number 1, I could care less about some of the other issues, sure, makes sense. It is what it is here. But that's the gist of the conversation here. It's just understanding and knowing what your end goal for your collection or why you're collecting or what you're collecting. If you have that end goal in mind, then you can make a good decision on whether or not the hobby can fund itself. I'm not saying that it can't be done, because it can. But it doesn't fit for every last person. So when you got all of these umpteen thousand of people out here on the interweb saying the hobby can fund itself, just be careful. Some people don't collect like you, and their method of collecting may not fit into how you collect. With that being said, just do what I normally do. It's like caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Not everything is a good deal, but recognize a good deal when you see it, and recognize when it is within your abilities to grab it at that time. Trust me, I really want to get a good giant size X-Men 1, but it's just not in the cards right now. I just can't bring myself to pay the money for a giant size X-Men 1 at these prices. Just like, as I continue on the collection to gain all the different Wonder Womans here, I'm not at that point yet where I could honestly say it's like, $200 for this issue, $300 for that issue. I'm not there yet for ultra high grade. If I come across them in auctions and able to get, even just reader copies, I'm happy with that until I could get to the point where I have the means and methods to upgrade. But I'm not going to sacrifice other books in my collection that I do keep near and dear enough to say, I'm going to sacrifice you to get this other book upgraded some more. That's just not me. So on that note, I'm going to flip the script here. I'm going to ask the audience, what do you guys want to talk about now, since we out of that topic here, and before we close the show, because we're in our second hour and it seems like nobody's really talking too much. So what do you guys want to talk about here? And as you guys figure that out, just as a point of accountability, because you guys have to keep me accountable for this type of stuff, I have done the covers for the first 3 issues of Legends of the Giant Slayer, both a regular A cover and a not safe for work one. So that means that's 6 covers that was done over this week here. I started to do more panel work for Legends 101, that series here. Starting a new topic for the actual lecture, which I find kind of interesting, but it's going to be short, sweet, and to the point here. And Don is saying I'm just prepping for my next show, going through my spiders. So you're looking at your ASMs, your webs, your spectaculars. Oh, see, if I was a speculating man, you want to know what I would be speculating on right about now? I would be speculating on Spidey Super Stories. They overdue. The reason why I say that they're overdue is because of the simple fact that with all the hoopla and everything going on about PBS losing funding, one of the things that we got from PBS was the Spidey Super Stories. And I remember watching those on the Electric Company like it was yesterday. But, those are comic books that they're not hard to find, but they're hard to come by in great condition here. But that's just me. That's where I put my speculation on Spider-Man books. Everybody up here talking about Venom and all the different Venom books, all the Spider-Verse books. It's like, for me, if I have to spec on anything Spider-Man related, first it would be Spidey Super Stories. Second, it would be Jessica Drew Spider-Woman, and third would be Miles Morales, in that order. And people are going to look at me crazy, like, why Spidey Super Stories? Because it's virtually unheard of by most Spider-Man collectors. Everybody wants ASM, but the thing about it is like the fun, good nature adventures that kind of put Spider-Man on the map and kind of made Spider-Man kind of like a educational household name with Spidey Super Stories. And you had all the guest appearances in Spidey Super Stories, such as like She-Hulk and Thor and everything. We even and again, we would not even have the Thanos copter if it wasn't for Spidey Super Stories. So it's just one of those things. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's an untapped arc. And if it wasn't for PBS and doing the Spidey Super Story skits on television, Marvel would not have the comic book versions of Spidey Super Stories on the shelves. So, yep. Yeah, PBS Kids now it is an online subscription channel, so I'm hoping that they will manage to keep some of their shows ongoing. But they're not going to go back and show us reruns of the original Electric Company from the 70s. They barely show us Electric Company from the 2000s, the remake from the 2000s. And the 2001 was nowhere near as polished as the original 70s Electric Company. Just like I kind of was hoping that PBS would bring back shows like 321 Contact and Square One TV. Square One TV was ahead of its time, where they actually made mathematics entertaining and learnable. And one of the key things, and I do have to, I'm going off topic for a bit. So if we're talking about PBS and we're talking about a couple of shows that they had during a time that was really, really good for school age kids. Everybody knows about Sesame Street, but people keep forgetting about Electric Company, which was good for phonics and reading. 321 Contact, which was good for science and nature. And in the 90s, they had Square One Television, which they did for mathematics. Now, Electric Company, 321 Contact, and Square One TV all had live action features that was mainstays for those shows here. Electric Company had multiple ones. Electric Company had the Spidey Super Stories. They had their weird version of the $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 pyramid that they would play. And then I forgot what the other one was. It was one other one that they did on a consistent basis that was all part of Electric Company. 321 Contact had a live action series called The Bloodhound Gang. And the Bloodhound Gang would use things from science to solve all these different cases. And they were like, teenage detectives and everything. And they kind of ran like their own little detective agency. So the Bloodhound Gang was a part of 321 Contact. As far as Square One Television also had a live action segment that was called MathNet, which was a takeoff of Dragnet. And they had detectives that used mathematical problems and theorem to solve actual cases. So all three shows had real world examples of how stuff actually worked in the real world when they were in circulation here. Now, PBS Kids, I don't think it's going to run those older shows the way that we got them back in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't see that happening here. I wish they would, because it would get a lot of these kids back into seeing how it works in real life, how a lot of the stuff that they are trying to teach you really work in real life, and how it will help you in real life. Yeah, I barely remember the Odd Squad because I like the Bloodhound Gang a lot better than Odd Squad. I remember the Odd Squad, but Bloodhound Gang was so much better. Just like, and Elaine, you probably remember this. It's like back in the day we had the original Degrassi High. And then I thought this was a spinoff of Degrassi, which was Powerhouse. I thought Powerhouse was a spinoff of Degrassi, which was like this one rec center that all these kids and stuff would go to, and they dealt with real life situations and everything. They dealt with drug addiction and all this other stuff about doing what is right for your community. But with funding and stuff being cut, and the fact that PBS Kids is online, how often do they play the older stuff? Because I don't even think that they play a lot of the older episodes of Sesame Street anymore. We don't get a lot of the older Sesame Street episodes. Like, these younger kids will never know what Mr. Hooper's malt shop really was like. They probably wouldn't remember people like Gordon. What was her name? Susan. People wouldn't remember Susan, the one person who was deaf that lived on Sesame Street, and she had to use sign language. I don't think they would go back to those episodes, which they need to. And the reason I believe that they won't go back is because they're more afraid of parents today complaining about the topics and stuff that they talked about back then, which was kind of like, unheard of, during that time. But now people would be overly sensitive. He said, my sons are more into Degrassi High. Yeah. Wait, it's like, Maria which one actually got married on Sesame Street here? I know Susan and Gordon were married, but I thought whatchamacallit, Maria got married on Sesame Street. I can't even think of his name now. Yeah, talking about the lady that owns Barkley. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's like, I know Maria got married to somebody that's there. It was a whole bunch of people that was on Sesame Street that we used to name by names here. Louise, yes. That was a big to do on Sesame Street, but yet you're not going to see that stuff on PBS Kids online. They're not going to play the older stuff. And I kind of wish that there was a way that those episodes were archivable. I mean, there's a lot of skits that they don't do anymore. Like one of the things is doing its own thing. Come on, can you tell which one? That would not be done. That will not be done anymore because we're more in a day and age of inclusion, and people will have problems dealing with that here. See, you missed the whole thing. You missed the whole spiel. You missed it. I would suggest not to go back and watch the rest of it, but you missed the whole spiel. I said for long-term collectors, it's an impossibility for us to make the hobby fund itself. But for people who are just getting in, people who just really don't care about the having the full runs of stuff and everything to that magnitude, yeah, it's very well possible. Yeah, they got married and had a daughter on the show. Exactly. I remember all of that, but again, that's growing up with PBS here. And no, I'm not doing this as an endorsement of PBS as a whole here, but it was just one of those things that when we got into the whole speculation thing here, that was one of the reasons why I was specking on Spidey Super Stories, because it's a forgotten part of history. That was one of the few comic books that were really created for the PBS joint venture between Marvel and PBS dealing with Spidey Super Stories on Electric Company. And I still have that theme song going in my head from time to time here. Yeah, let me look into that. I'll let you know on Thursday. Yeah, we could talk about that more on Thursday about some of the good old shows of PBS here that were relatively mainstays, such as Electric Company, 321 Contact, Square One, Sesame Street, Degrassi High, Upstairs, Downstairs, Masterpiece Theater. um, Dang it, I forgot The Joy of Painting. That what it was called, The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. I'm about to say, it's like, what was, dang, it's like, I remember Bob Ross was on PBS, but I can't remember the name of it. Then the light bulb here is like, yeah, The Joy of Painting and everything. We're not going to go back over an hour's worth of conversation. We're not. But I'll give you the short, condensed version of it. The only way that the hobby funds itself is when you set your goal for it to be such in the very beginning of your collecting process here. If you are a long-term collector like myself, or a long-term, or a person who is collecting for to share it with other people, it is impossible for the hobby to fund itself. It's no way possible, because we're not going to give up what we build up as far as collections to buy or trade or sell to upgrade any other books in that collection. It'll just be easier for us just to put money aside and just buy a better one. It's not because we can't do it. It's just that our end goal is we are trying to preserve these books in such a way where it is going to be shared with other people. Now, unlike those who take monetary value over that, they might be more willing to let go of issue 2, 3, and 4, and 5 just to get a better copy of number 1 and be happy with the number 1. That's the short, condensed version of it. So it really depends on your motivation here. If your motivation is purely monetary and not trying to have it all, sure, it can work for you. There's umpteen billions of people out there on the interwebs that tells you how to invest in comics. But for people like myself who are long-term, been at this for more than 30 plus years of collecting comics, ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The only way that it's going to happen is that there have to be like some major catastrophic financial disaster where I have to sell off the whole thing, or all of a sudden I just wake up one day and be like, Avengers, who gives a care? I'm going to sell off that. Oh, who cares about Archie? I'm going to sell off all of that. Oh, who cares about the Incredible Hulk? I don't see that happening. I really don't. So, yep, Don was laughing at that here. Yeah, I think one of the reasons they may not rerun some of those shows is because they are not big on having to pay the actors. Yeah, yeah. I see that's the other thing. How does residuals work? Because to be quite honest here, if they pay them residuals for work on Sesame Street, then I wonder, and maybe you could use your connections here on this question. If that's the case, that they have to pay residuals for that, I'm wondering how much it would cost to buy the intellectual rights to some of their shows then. One or two shows I would probably be interested in, just to hear the actual total that would need to come up, because if I'm able to figure out a way to get it bankrolled, I would not mind trying to produce a updated version of it. And for those who up here who knows about PBS, the show that I'm thinking about purchasing, if I'm able, if it is available, would be either where in the world is Carmen San Diego, or Where in Time? If I'm able to buy the game show rights from that station from Boston, I have ideas to revamp it and bring it back. Ooh, that would be interesting. Yeah, that I remember Jupe. Okay, you go ahead and get some sleep and everything here. But yeah, that that would be the show that I would not mind buying the rights to if I able to get a good conglomerate of people together, because I believe what they had in Where in the World worked, and Where in Time, and I saw Where in Time failed, because technically Where in the World is Carmen San Diego, the game show that they had on PBS, should still be running today. It should be. There is still life up in there. I see a lot of reruns on YouTube, but with YouTube being the way that it is, the family of people like Lynn Thigpen would not see a cent from it, because she was the chief in both Where in the World and Where in Time. I believe Greg Lee is still kicking around, and I forgot the other host that was there. Rockapella is still around, and then I forgot who. I know most of the crew from Where in Time is still around, but I have ideas for that as a whole here. Normally, you would not. Normally you wouldn't be able to consider it PBS, while private gets 75% of the funding from the government. Hufford Midland Harcourt. Well, border bond software is no longer in existence. That's one part of the problem. That's one part of the problem. But before we get into border bond and understanding what rights and stuff that we have from border bond, we have to get the rights from PBS, or I think it's like WGBO in Boston first. Because if you get the rights and stuff from them to take over the show, some of that entitlement comes over, and we have to look at the documents of how they were granted the rights from Border Bond Software to use the namesake of Carmen San Diego, a lot of the criminals from Vile and such. Now we get into an area that I'm sort of somewhat familiar with copyright law, but it always goes in processes, because even with computer software, which I'm more familiar with, if me as a company buys another software company who did licensed projects for other people, when we buy out that company, we also buy those licenses as well. So those licenses are free for us to look at to see what rights and privileges that we have to either continue manufacturing or redistribute at that point. Now, if those contracts ran out, then we have to renegotiate. But it's like I said, it's several steps in the process here. So we just have to go in that aspect here. Yeah, WGBAs. Yeah. Paralife, we're talking about the TV show rights. We're talking about the TV show, the TV game show rights for it. Not the actual game itself, but the TV rights. and it was last done by and yeah, WGBH Boston was the original people that broadcast the original Where in the World and Where in Time. Yeah, they licensed the IP, but they don't own it. The new company would just release the game from that IP. That is correct. The It's not about owning. It's not owning what it is. It's just more along the lines the licensing transfers over. We have to abide by whatever was in that original contract. So that's the key thing here. Yeah, I know because they have to release a brand new Carmen game a few months ago. Yeah, and that's what Parallax was talking about. That's why HMH owns the franchise. That's the new people who owns the Carmen game. That's only the video game where they don't own the rights to the television game show rights. They don't own that right as of yet. They own the new stuff that goes over there, and they can re-release the Borabon stuff that we grew up with. But the WGBH game show version is still WGBH's game show version of both of those things here. Yeah, they own this. They own the actual computer software rights. That's not what's being disputed here. What we're talking about is the television rights that WGBH in Boston had to do on PBS. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, and where in Time. So yeah, that license is dead. That was 30 years ago. Maybe not. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know, but it's safe to say. Yeah, that is true. It most likely won't be perpetual, but it'll be something to look into. There'll still be something to look into because, like I said, it's to me that show should have never gone off the air the way that it did. Because they had so many different ways to keep Carmen Sandiego online, Carmen Sandiego on the air. They had so many different versions of Carmen Sandiego that they could have gone to. Because remember, Borabon had so many different versions of where in where in or where in blank is Carmen Sandiego, and that's the way that I would revamp the series. It would be where in blank is Carmen Sandiego. In each episode, it could take you on a time trip. It could take you on a geographical trip. It could take you on a universal trip where we talked about the planets and all the other stuff because there was a where in space is Carmen Sandiego. So it was one of those things that, I sit back and I think about all of these older things that it's like, this should have never left the air. They had so much untapped potential to make this thing work, but cost and all the other stuff and TV the way that it is, if it's not getting the ratings, it's not getting the ratings. Yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it would be like the Spider-Man movie rights being sold to Sony forever. Yeah, yeah, that's that. If it was, I'd be like, man, let me find a group of capital investors, and it could be. It's like, yeah, I'll be like, hey, give us X, Y, and Z. Let's own this franchise and put it back on television. Especially with PBS, it's like it was a great PBS show. That was just one of those things here. And thinking about how the world is as of right now, and all this came through speculating on Spidey Super Stories and growing up with the Electric Company and seeing Spidey Super Stories on Electric Company. And now it's like, if I told people, it's like, what Spider-Man books should I invest in? Invest in Spidey Super Stories. And they're going to look at me crazy. It's like, why not ASM 300? Because there are a whole bunch of them out there. Invest in Spidey Super Stories. Why? Because there's history there. Spidey Super Stories is tied to the Electric Company, which was on TV on PBS. It was a lot of kids' first exposure to Spider-Man outside of the comic books. And this was a live action skit that they did on Electric Company, not cartoon. But it is what it is here. Yes. Netflix did a animated series of Carmen Sandiego too. I watched that. See, see, you just obviously I'm glad that you're here because you just kind of sort of proved my point here. You know, people used to put these in quarter boxes and 50-cent boxes. Now they're in dollar boxes, and now all of a sudden they're worth money. Yeah, PBS just lost their federal funding, and their production funding will be gone in a year. Well, I'm not one to put out speculation. I don't believe PBS is going to die, but PBS is going to be owned by a private entity, which is going to kind of suck. They're sending PBS and NPR to be bought out by a private company. And if that happens, it won't have the same type of programming ever again. It would lead to a different type of programming on those airwaves here, where PBS was pretty much for informational and educational purposes here. If PBS gets bought out by a private entity, I see it becoming more entertainment and anything goes. So it would be no more like how you have like your Netflix or your Prime, which is going to suck. And then your older libraries for like the older shows such as Upstairs, Downstairs, and Masterpiece Theater, and The Joy of Art, and Sesame Street, which again, Sesame Street is one of those ones where their library is getting sold off little by little. It's a sad day. It really is a sad day here. Yep. 6 months from now, their stuff would be easier to get. Probably so. Yeah, they're also shutting down their specialty channels that covers things like the First Nations programming. Yeah. Only thing I just know is like what I heard on the newswire about PBS looking into private funding now. Hoping that somebody like CBS or NBC, hopefully not Disney. I don't want Disney to take over PBS. Disney has too many networks already. But it's going to be a private entity if they're going to keep NPR, a lot of NPR on the line, and a lot of the public broadcasting stuff on the regular television. They're going to have to get some funding from some type of private benefactor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. People don't realize how many UHF channels we used to have on regular broadcast television back in the day. No, 26 is still around. Now you're making me think about it. 26, 32. 50 was not always there because we had 60. I believe 60 became 50, 66, 38 was the Christian channel because you had 32, 38, 44 was a partial television station. It was on during the day and and during the nights it was like on TV or Playboy Channel back in the day. 60 became 50 because we used to have a channel 60 and a channel 50, and then 50, 60. Somehow they lost the rights to use channel 60, and then they bought channel 50 and they moved a lot of the programming over there. We had 66. It's just weird in that aspect. Yeah, if we're lucky, Disney would grab it. Otherwise, Ape will snap it up. Yeah. Channel 20. I mean, we had a lot of UHF channels back in the day. Now a lot of them gone over to the wayside and everything here. Yeah, Channel 20 was connected to the city of Chicago colleges. Yeah, and we're focused on educational programming. So that would explain why there was a lot of lectures on there, because you would get like specific lectures, college lectures on Channel 20. Sorry, Apple TV. Yeah. But 20 was not a true subsidiary of WTTW though. That was the other thing here. Because WTTW, I always used to remember that they always ran a telethon like right around like Thanksgiving. They always had like yeah, they had a great series on filmmaking. See, I didn't watch 20 as much as I did 11. 11 had more of the stuff that caught my interest. Not to say that I didn't watch 20 from time to time, but 11 had more of the stuff that caught my interest. And then, being, during my childhood days, 60 and 66 had a lot of other stuff that caught my attention at late night, like all of the anime and everything late night. No, but they were run by the city colleges in connection with PBS, which makes sense. I kind of figured that it had to be like a subsidiary in some form and fashion. But WTTW was strictly 100% PBS. That was PBS led all the way. But I didn't realize that 20 was also PBS. But then again, 20 was not always on 24/7. It was like based upon schedules of classes when those shows were on. But nevertheless, it's an interesting, very interesting to take a look into that here. And it's interesting to also know that PBS was a gateway into comics. And who would have ever thought that it would have came through Electric Company? And that also makes me wonder, how come Reading Rainbow never interjected on comic book reading? That's something that maybe that's a question that I might save one day if I ever get to interview LeVar Burton. Not to make it like it's a bad thing, but the point of Reading Rainbow was to capture kids' minds in the joy of reading. It was focused more on stories and novels and not comic books. But yet at the same time, back in the day, the Electric Company and Spidey Super Stories, they kept the idea that Spidey Super Stories was a live comic book that was actually happening on television. And that was kind of like the messed up thing here. Yeah, John watched Channel 20, secondary first channel. Yeah. And that would made Spidey Super Story so unique, because I remember how everybody else used to speak normally. When Spider-Man spoke, it was always either a thought bubble or a speech bubble. And everybody else in the scene would have to look up like this and read it before they respond. And it was just craziness. That to me was crazy when I see it now. But back as a kid, it was kind of like, oh man, that's kind of cool, a comic book character in real life, and he doesn't speak audibly. It's like everything is done by speech bubble or thought bubble, and everybody else in that scene has to stop and read it. Not read it out loud. You can see their head moving, and they like literally read it before they actually respond to them. I believe he did a show or two on comics. I believe he might have. But it just was just like one of those things that it's like out of all the episodes that I remember of reading Rainbow, I don't remember a particular comics episode, or if they talked about a particular comic, or they may have gone and visit a comic book company, but they never recommended comics itself. They always recommended books. Yeah, Burton was going after the audience that watched boys literature series. Maybe. I mean, that's what it looked like, because a lot of the books that they mentioned there, some were pretty good, and other ones was like that really wouldn't hold my interest. It really wouldn't hold my interest. Period. But it just was weird in that aspect here. Man, I didn't really realize that going off topic would actually almost fill the second hour. We're talking about all the different traps and everything about speculation, especially dealing with a certain book that a certain person may not know about as of yet. That's the reason why she can't go back and rewatch the video. We're going to make it unavailable only for that one person. Because we actually talked about the value of the book itself and how it's messed up here. Yeah, he was going after going after people who grew up on the Shelley Duvall audience and our kids. Yeah, sorry, HBO. Yeah, but it was just a lot of stuff here. Now let's see. Maybe one of these days I'm going to go back and try to take one of these from the Death of Small Press Publisher shows and talk about like a lot of the older educational shows that were on back in the day, that if they were on today, a lot of people would have controversy with them. Like, for example, people would have controversy with Romper Room. And I just really don't get what the controversy would be there. And then the one thing that I know that they can't do now that they can do that they did back then was the magic mirror. They couldn't do the magic mirror from Romper Room anymore. I don't think they could get away with a lot of the stuff with the New Zoo Review that was on like GN and NBC early Saturday mornings too. That was another one of those shows that was nationally broadcast that you wouldn't be able to get away with too much more. Picture Pages, only because of the individual who hosted it. Well, I would say the second incarnation of Picture Pages, because of the person who hosted it, they can't do it. I believe that there was a prior version of Picture Pages done by Jack Barry dealing with the Mortimer the Magic Marker that works with the television. Goes all the way back to like the 1950s. And then when they brought it back in the 70s, a certain doctor of education became the host of Picture Pages. And, well, his name has not been completely cleared as of yet. So I know there's a lot more people that remember his version of Picture Pages than the 1950s one. But yeah, that's something that we could deal with in a different episode here. That's if you guys want to talk about it and bring it up and everything to that magnitude, because that's when you think about all the educational stuff that they used to do back in the day, they couldn't get away with it now because of the way that people are overly sensitive to stuff. Like a lot of the ABC after school specials, they could not do today. They would not be able to do today. You're just like, you traumatizing these kids. It's like, but that was reality back then. We didn't have problems with that. But today's kids would have problems with it. That 1 Million Moms group would cancel all of those shows that we would love as kids. Yeah. You know, I grew up watching things like Romper Room every so often. I was not really a big Sesame Street kid, but I like Romper Room. I like The Great Space Coaster. That was another kid, educational kids show that we had. And then the modern day version of The Great Space Coaster, which led up to a possible Time Lord in the making, which is the Magic School Bus with Miss Frizzle. I believe she is a Time Lord. I really do. Nobody should have that much power and ability to make a school bus do the things that they got away with. But like Elaine said, certain groups would be ready to cancel that type of stuff as of right now. But I will say this here. Where was that group for Kalu? That show should have never made it to air. It should have never made it to air. I know Doctor Who predates Magic School Bus, but there's no doubt about it that Miss Frizzle had all the makings of a Time Lord. I'm sorry. It's pretty much what way I see it is. Whoever created the Magic School Bus is like, we're going to create this fantasy epic that could work with Doctor Who, but we're going to make it educational. What are we going to call it? We're going to call it the Magic School Bus. Instead of the sonic screwdriver, we're just going to give the person who we think is a Time Lord a school bus to use to train kids. I'm like, oh. Yeah, it's like, no, the kids would be fine. The parents are the problem. Yeah. Kalu was for it to be an educational show, a so-called educational show. There was really no educational value in it other than watching a kid acting poorly get corrected. That was, she was never put in a situation. She was never put in a situation to do so. We don't know that. We don't know if Miss Frizzle only has one heart. Mind you, she actually drove the school bus inside of one of her students for them to learn about how a common cold affects a person. We don't know what she is. Though I grant you, the bus is very likely a TARDIS. It's more than a TARDIS. That bus is a weapon. I truly believe that is a weapon because it could convert to anything and everything that she needs at that time. There's no way in the world Magic School Bus would be be used similar as a vehicle that would have been in Fantastic Voyage. I'm sorry. It's no way that that would be sterile enough. One of my favorite episodes. Yeah, it's like she showed. It's like just showed my niece that one the other day. Yeah, she drove a magical school bus. It had everybody jump on. The magic school bus shrunk down to the size of like microscopic size and traveled inside the human body. Just because they were up here trying to see, why a certain person was sick with a cold. I was like, this is way above most children's pay grade to go that deep scientifically. Then I remember the other one where she made this magic school bus get big enough where they could go inside of the engine for they could see how the actual engine works. That was another episode where they went to the junkyard and they were trying to fix the engine to the magic school bus. And I was like, yeah, this is just not the whole thing here. Yeah, we could. Now, would Miss Frizzle take out Doctor Who? No. I think Doctor Who is a little bit more clever than Miss Frizzle could ever be, but she is pretty much on the same level where she could probably handle some of the things that a doctor could handle, and probably be able to break it down to elementary school kids easily. But yeah, I wonder. Yeah, Lily Tomlin is still around. I believe she's still alive. Yeah, she is still alive. But again, that would definitely be another show that group would be ready to cancel right away. Magic School Bus. I don't know. And again, Magic School Bus also made its debut on where PBS. I believe that she might be have connections with the. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. That's the reason why I love the idea of people writing fan fiction about the crossover between Doctor Who and Magic School Bus. To have a Miss Frizzle come clean about who she really is. Because I honestly believe that Miss Frizzle is not her real name, especially with her forgetful nature. I just believe that that's just something that kind of stuck because they always said that she always gets frazzled or frizzled. Her brain gets frizzled, and she had frizzly hair. But that's just me. Secret Agent Frizzle. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know, but it would be nice. It would be very, very nice to have those fan fiction crossovers between her and Doctor Who. And what would be funny is like she comes across the sonic screwdriver. She looks at it. It's like, oh, this is a nice little instrument. I used to be able to use one of these back in the day. Like to hear her say something like that, I was like, whoa, hold on. That would be scary. That would be so scary that it would be just like, yeah, yeah. Ramona would end up with the original K9 in space. Yeah. thing in. Now let's see. I need to stop talking to Elaine because now Elaine had me going from Magic School Bus to Beverly Clearly and the Ramona's book series now. And all of a sudden, I just thought about witches and onion sandwiches, which is weird. Like David Tennant fixes K9. Yeah, yeah. Miss Frizzle Miss Frizzle may have met her, stole the TARDIS, and got the plans for it and built her own. Yes, Joe, but Starfleet family. Oh my goodness, I still won't forget that the fan fiction to cross Fast and Furious with Star Trek. Dominic being tossed that far into the future and be like, it's like wait, you want to simulate me? That's not going to happen. I'm too tough for that. Nothing is stronger than family. And then he gets assimilated, and then all the Borg is like, yeah, Dom versus Klingon. Yes, fan fiction. Great fan fiction here. Yeah, you might have honor, but do you have? What do you got? Family. Dom being assimilated to the Borg and they go to Vulcan. You just like, you guys may not be emotional and you may have logic, but ask yourself, do you have family? and Sama like looking at Dom like, that is one of the most illogical things that you can say as of right now. But it stands true. Do you have family? As of right now, you're not a part of mine, and I'm about to take over. For you can be as one with my family. You got honor, but do you got family? But yeah, I would not mind seeing a well-written fan fiction where we cross the magic school bus with Doctor Who. It's just a lot of stuff that's there that could fit Miss Frizzle into that universe easily. And then the whole thing about her students going along with the ride, and then having the Doctor be like, why are these school children here? It's like, this is not no educational tour through a museum. They are in real danger here. The 72 Kerplo. The 72 charge gets launched out of this big old torpedo bay, goes into one side of the Borg cube, drives all the way across the whole cube, and come out the back before the Borg cube implodes. And the only thing you can see is Donald's like, nothing beat American muscle. Oh my goodness. No, I gotta stop. I gotta stop here. That fan fiction would not, people would get mad at us, both Trekkies and fans of Fast and the Furious would get mad at us if that ever came to a movie. That we gonna have the NCC 1701F, and the F is for family. Starting the birthday of my second cousin Guido. Guido. Why? Because the family always celebrates everyone's birthday. Oh my goodness! But yeah, we gotta stop. We hit our 2 hour mark here, so we're on the East Coast side. They're in the future at this point. They're already on their Sunday, so I want to make sure that everybody else can have their Saturday as me be here. So I enjoy all the conversation that we have here in our chat here. Thank you so much, chat, for helping make the second hour the way it is here. I mean, we got through our topic here where we could pretty much say it really depends on your goal for your collection or whether or not the hobby can fund itself here. I'm not going to say no, but for me, myself, I can speak personally on my side, it's an impossibility. For some of the long time collectors, impossibility. For newer collectors that are just only looking at monetary value, it's very possible. Very possible. Yep. Then there's Don's like, thank you. Had a great night. You're on a great episode. Yep. Okie dokie. I'm out. Catch you Thursday. I will catch you on Thursday here. So on that note, live life, grow, and be well. And we're out of here for another week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. If you're on the Central and West Coast, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We are out. See you later. Goodbye.